Patricia, and we were Groupthink theory. And we have an activity for you guys, so I want you all to take out a half a sheet of paper or something, if you could. And I'm going to give you guys like 2 minutes to go through this riddle and solve it. One of the answers is down here, but you have to pick which one you think it is, and no talking to anyone, just do it all by yourself. It's fast.
Yeah, and it's 100. I just know it's 100. It is, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's what? It's 100. Let's do that. I remember reading this. Somebody sent it to me on Facebook, and I was like, at first I was like, what? And I was like, it's 100.
I mean, it's funny that he uses that empty stuff, but yeah, it's $100.
And then just write down on your piece of paper what you think it is, and don't show anyone.
No, just let us know like when everyone's got an answer.
Let's give you guys 1 more minute. Even if you don't know it, write down what you think it could be. Even if you guys don't have an answer, write down what you think it could be out of all those.
The money he lost?
Alright, now we're going to divide the classroom into, I guess we're going to do like half and half, because there seems to be less people on this side. So you guys are all going to work together, and then these 2 rows are going to work together. You're going to come up with one collective decision.
Like as a group.
As a group, what you think the answer is. And all of you need to contribute and put your, everyone show what you got, and collectively come up with one.
I said 100. I said 100. No, it's 100 because he took the 100, but then he gave it back. Yeah, and then he got $70 worth of goods, so the owner lost that 70 and gave the $30 in change. But like technically he gave back the 100 that he took, so it's only $100. Yeah, but because he gave the owner the $100 that he took, it like nulled it. Yeah, it's still 100. So like he gave it back to the guy. So like now the owner's at 0. He didn't lose anything. But then he gave the guy $70 in merchandise. That's 70, and then $30 in change. 100.
Okay, like, so he, so, oh, there's something about it, right? I still know, you know, right? So at some point, but he's not making it up, right? Exactly. Having changed and you're keeping 100. But I'm yeah, you lost, he lost the merchandise. He didn't actually how much money to whatever you guys so like,
Yeah.
whatever you say.
100? Alright, the way I looked at it, so like, I took $100 from the register, but then he like gave back that 100. So like it was like no, but then the dude gave the guy $70 worth of like food, so $70 and then gave $30 worth of change. So that's 100.
So he's still the 100. Alright, everyone ready? No.
It's probably something we're not thinking like what's the
Can you explain it as we actually
No,
Okay.
okay, so what, as a group, collectively, what was your guys' answer?
100.
And you guys?
100.
You both said 100? Okay. So the answer is actually 200.
You were wrong too.
You guys were all just affected by groupthink, just with that activity right there, because like how many of you wrote down a different answer than what your group collectively came up with?
No one has said 200 in my group.
I think she did.
I'm actually wondering.
Yeah.
Did you guys find that there was like a leader kind of leading the whole group? And did you find that maybe some people didn't talk as much?
Yeah,
Alright, this all has to do with groupthink, guys, so that was just your little.
But he gave that 100 back.
So what is groupthink exactly? It's a psychological phenomenon that occurs within a group of people in which the desire for harmony or conformity in the group results in an irrational or dysfunctional decision-making outcome. Groups affected by groupthink will disregard realistic alternatives and typically choose a more logical approach in effort to maintain harmony within the group. So say I was just doing that group activity and I really thought it was 200, but one of my group leaders was like, it's 100, it's definitely 100, like kind of to maintain harmony, I might just keep quiet myself and not really stick up for what I believe in. So we tend to go with our groups because of peer pressure.
And then groupthink is also the practice of approaching problems or issues as matters that are best dealt by the consensus of the group rather than by the individuals acting independently. So basically like groupthink restrains individuality and creativity. So an example of this could be like if you have low self-esteem and you're put in a group, you really like would probably stay quiet because you don't want to express the wrong decision and you don't want to really come off as like you don't know something if your group is talking and you don't really have the same idea as them. So you'd probably like just stay quiet. Groupthink has a lot to do with self-esteem.
So we just wanted to ask you guys, based on what we just talked about, how many of you guys have ever been in a group and you felt that you had to go along with the majority even if you didn't agree with the decision? How many of you thought that?
Just by raising your hand. Okay, yeah, and then an example that I have for this is I'm in a sorority, so a lot of the times when we want to have a mixer with someone, say like, this is just an example, we have like a poll in our Facebook group, so if we vote on it, it could be like, who wants to hang out with baseball this weekend, or who wants to hang out with basketball? We all like vote, so if I see that 15 girls have voted for baseball, I'd probably lean more towards voting for baseball instead of being the only one who votes for the basketball, so that's basically me falling into groupthink.
It's like not being able to stick up for yourself. Then I have you ever changed your opinion on something because of what someone else's view of it was? And my example for this was when I was little, I used to go to SeaWorld all the time. I like was obsessed with SeaWorld. My parents would bring me there. And then I don't know if any of you have heard of the movie Blackfish. I watched the movie Blackfish and I was like so conformed into thinking like, now I think SeaWorld like is the worst place ever because I heard all of their like ideas behind Blackfish and watched Blackfish. It's a really good movie, and I just was I changed my opinion completely based on someone else's ideas about a certain thing. And do you guys have any examples of your own? When you may have.
Well, basically, I know that I'm in a sorority as well, and like I heard before I was even part of it, I heard that people used to say, oh, like pledging is crazy, like don't do that, like there's no point in joining a sorority or whatever, like. And I used to think that at first, but then I started hanging out with that group of friends, and like my mind started changing towards that. So I was like, actually, let me give this a try and see if what people say is what really it is. So like that was me joining the groupthink that the sorority like wanted me to think. So.
Yeah.
Okay, with your example, let me ask you, do you think that it actually was because the video used persuasion techniques versus the groupthink?
I guess it was both, but it was a group of people who used to work at SeaWorld and were now going against it. I guess it was kind of persuasive as well.
Because you weren't in the group itself.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so I guess it was persuasion. We have a video that is really good that we found on YouTube.
And this is like, to get an idea of what groupthink was, we went on YouTube and we watched a lot of videos, and this one actually made like the most sense to us, so we definitely wanted to show this to you guys. They explained it really clearly and really well.
Close look at the 3 lines on the right. Which line is the same size as the one on the left? And how certain are you of your answer?
This
Are
was
you
like our
50%
activity,
certain?
kind of.
90? 100%? Well, if you're like most people and you take time to think this through, you'd say line A. If you take a close look, line B and C are clearly too tall. So line A is the obvious choice. But this isn't a video about optical illusions. It's a video about peer pressure. What happens when you clearly know that the answer is C, but everybody else is telling you that they got the answer A. When this test is done in a control group, that is when there's no peer pressure, almost every single person gets it right. Line A is clearly too short and line B is clearly too tall. But when you add peer pressure, things get interesting. Now imagine that you're in a room with 9 other people. You're asked to compare the lines, same as before, and you think that's easy, it's C. Then person 1 steps forward and announces that his answer is A. Your first response would probably be surprise. How could he have gotten it wrong? The question is so easy. In fact, you might even feel a little superior at this point because you know his answer is wrong and you are right. But as a few more people step forward and say that they got A as well, confidence in your answer begins to erode. As everyone else announces that they got A as well, you'd start wondering if you were the one that got something seriously wrong, as if everyone else saw the trick of the question and you didn't. By the time it's your turn to answer, you might even be embarrassed to say that you got C. So what do you say when it's your turn? Do you say what you believe and go with C? Or go with the group and say line A? When this is done in a laboratory, over 1/3 of people will change their answer to A. The researchers also identified different factors that made it more or less likely that a person would submit to peer pressure. People are more likely to bend to peer pressure when there's a large group of people conforming or when an entire group is unanimous in their decision. They also found that, in general, different groups handle peer pressure better than others. The research found that women are more likely to conform than men. Eastern cultures that place high value on collectivism conform more than Western culture.
So that was basically what a easy way to explain groupthink that we really like that video. Now, there. All right, so the history of groupthink. It was actually, the term was coined by William H. White in 1952, but the person who took it to the next level was Irving Janis. But I just want to say a quote by William when he first coined the term. What we are talking about is rationalized conformity, an open, articulate philosophy which holds that group values are not only expedient, but right and good as well. So a lot of this has to do with conforming to a group, and that really came from William H. White Jr.'s verse when he coined the term, and then
Irving Janis basically pioneered the initial research. He was a 20th century social psychologist who identified this phenomenon, and for most of his research, he really focused on decision making, and that's like where groupthink came in. He really loved to like stress on decision making and why a lot of people make the decisions they do and like what persuades them to make those decisions. He also describes how groups are able to reach compromises through conformity. That was a huge research that he stressed on a lot, and it showed through both of our articles.
So just a little bit more about Irving Janis. He was a research psychologist, and after William coined the term, he was the one who took it to the next level. He was the one who committed all the research and put all his time. This was like his theory.
And he studied at Yale University, and he also was famous for his theory of groupthink, which basically just describes the systematic errors made by groups when collectively making a decision.
We wanted to look into some key words because these come up a lot, and they're not that common words, but like in this theory they are. So the in-group, basically an exclusive, typically small group of people with a shared interest or identity. So basically everyone wants to be part of the in-group. It's kind of like the peer pressure thing. You want to conform to the in-group, like that's like where psychologically most people want to be.
So out-group is those people who do not belong to a specific in-group. So out-group is just the people that usually do fall into groupthink, and they just like want to be a part of that in-group, so they usually just keep to themselves and then go with what everyone says. That's what the out-group people are usually persuaded towards.
Conformity is huge in this theory. It's basically we as humans changing in order to be a part of the group. That's like the most simple way to put it, and this theory is all about conformity.
cohesiveness is also a really huge keyword for this whole groupthink theory. They're constantly talking about groups as a whole and what they decide on and like why they decide as a group. So yeah, cohesiveness is very important.
And then self-censorship. Oh my gosh. Self-censorship is basically like what you guys kind of experienced in that activity that we did with the numbers. It's basically watching yourself. You don't want to do anything out of fear of going against the group, so you kind of just go with the group. If more than half the group thinks it's 100, then you kind of like go with 100. So the symptoms of groupthink, these we actually pulled off the internet. I just want to go over a couple of examples. So type 1, overestimations of the group, it's power and morality. This is about like if you have a very gung-ho group leader, like during the activity I saw someone stood up over here. It was kind of like, okay guys, like let's get this answer, like let's all work as a group. Like that group leader is like very gung-ho, and you're gonna kind of want to follow like someone who's willing to take the lead, whereas like I'm the type of person to not really take the lead and kind of just follow whoever decides to take the lead. So that's what the type 1 symptom of groupthink is. If you have a group leader in your group, then you're more likely to fall into groupthink. And type 2, if someone has a point of view and we push it to the side just because it goes against the rest of the group, that's closed-mindedness. And if that person just never speaks up for themselves, then we'll never understand their point of view, we'll never get it, and it'll just get thrown away. So that's another symptom of groupthink if that is happening within your group.
And then type 3 is pressure toward uniformity. So basically that's like when a member usually remains silent, and if they're asked if they have any input, they usually just keep quiet and keep to themselves. So an example of this could be if you're in a group project and your group thinks that they're done, but you know to yourself that there could be something you guys could do different, that you would change something, but instead of speaking out and like talking about it, you keep to yourself because you don't want to affect the group in a negative way, because they're so gung-ho. Like type 1, they're like definitely set on like what their group project already is, so you kind of just like stay quiet and keep to yourself. So that would be type 3. And then causes of groupthink, there's high group cohesiveness. That's groups with high cohesiveness that may pressure members to conform to their standards. Basically this would be like how many of you guys have been in a group where there's been one leader that took complete charge and they've expressed their opinion like super gung-ho about it, and they like don't want anyone else's opinions really, so you kind of just like go along with that. And then the second one would be structural faults, which would be like insulation of the group, lack of impartial leadership, and lack of norms requiring methodological procedures. So that would be like the opposite of high group cohesiveness.
Another huge cause of groupthink is group stress. If there are highly stressful external threats and internal threats within the group, you're more likely to make an irrational decision or just keep completely quiet to yourself. These can often lead to failures and dilemmas and a lot of difficulties in the decision-making process if there's a lot of group stress within the group. Have you guys ever felt extreme stress within a group setting, in any group? Yeah. And then group leaders who have a strong sense of power may cause stress upon the group, causing them to think irrationally. So these can be caused by the group leaders that are just putting so much stress on the rest of the group.
So benefits of groupthink, A, variety of perspectives, more information about possible alternatives, better decisions, and the dampening of biases. I have an example that's a benefit for groupthink, and it's called synergy. And synergy is basically the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So this could be a benefit for groupthink because basically like through a discussion of groups, you all come up with the best decision. So you stay together and you guys all like really like agree with each other. So that could be definitely an advantage of groupthink. It's usually more leaning towards negative, but synergy is definitely one thing they talk about the good of groupthink.
Yeah, there are like few benefits to groupthink. I wanted to talk about the mind bank. This is where discussion happens within a group. So like if you guys are in like a really good group, everyone does their part, everyone gets along, likes each other, and there's multiple like discussion of ideas like being thrown around, and you guys are giving your input and getting input like from other group members, and everyone's participating. This is when groupthink is actually beneficial, because you'll all get more out of it than you probably would working by yourself. You know, it's kind of leaning towards synergy, what Trish talked about too. So the dangers of groupthink: suppression of individual opinions and creative thought. For an example, if I'm too scared to say my own thoughts and things go left unsaid, my personal opinions just get thrown out the window, and I'll never be a contributor to the group, which is bad. I'm being affected by groupthink, and I need to be able to feel comfortable enough to say my own opinions and contribute as the group.
And then poor decision making is definitely a danger of groupthink. This could be also an example of, like I said it before, a hard-headed group member who like sticks to their idea of like what they want for the group, but if it's a bad decision and they don't like really take into consideration what everyone else thinks, that could be definitely a bad effect of groupthink.
And then like if you think of some group members that are like so hard-headed, like she said, and they will go against any other group member's opinion, like that's bad. Like they're a group leader who's being affected by groupthink. We just have this short clip from Pitch Perfect.
It's a little like quiet, so it's just quiet.
To come up with ideas on how to make this one stand out. Okay, you got it? Fire when ready. What are your ideas? Anything. Anybody right now would be great. Anybody can talk right now. What if we got those anybody but you? What if we got those dogs that bark jingle bells to back him up? Yeah, let me guess. You want those dogs to back him up because he's your dog? Yeah, that was a really great example of a horrible idea. Take him out. What? Take him out. But I'm wearing skinny jeans. I don't care. Go. Let's go. I want to see knees up. Knees up, please. Guys, I should give you a little more time. A minute. You have 1 minute, 60 seconds. My time is like a toddler in a tiara, okay? Precious and short. I need really great ideas. Snoop is coming.
So if you guys were in that group setting, how many of you would want to share your ideas after just seeing that guy get absolutely humiliated in front of the whole group? Yeah, so situations like that are definitely dangers of groupthink. Group leaders have a big effect on whether or not we will share, like how much we want to share.
And these are real world examples of groupthink. So there's a bunch here, but we're just gonna talk about 2 of them that we felt strongly about. The one that I'm gonna talk about was the BP oil spill. This was a huge example of groupthink that was really bad. The BP employees, Donald Vindrine and Robert Kaluza, they ignored the clear warning signs that the drilling well was unstable, and because they didn't want to spend the money for it to fix the problem, they kind of just ignored it, and they got everyone on board with that too, to not really say anything, which in the end it ended up being a huge problem, which caused the BP oil spill. All the other workers believed them, and they were affected by their groupthink, which fell into like that whole oil spill, which affected a lot of people, and I believe they actually went to jail.
They got convicted of manslaughter.
Yeah, because they chose, instead of fixing it and spending the money, they chose to ignore it, and everyone else chose to not say anything as well and not speak up.
Because they would be going against who's in charge and who's running the entire the institution or whatever. And I looked into the Challenger space shuttle. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of this. It was the NASA shuttle orbiter mission. It exploded 73 seconds into flight, killing all 7 of the crew members. And I read into this a lot, and a lot of people were saying it was causes of groupthink. There was supposed to be a manager meeting, and they decided to ignore the engineers' recommendations of waiting to launch the shuttle because there needed to be more checkups, more things to be worked on, and the managers just said, nope, launch it anyway. And it was devastating for all the families out these are Janice's ways of preventing groupthink. I won't like read them all to you, but they are very important because he was the theorist behind this. So in order to prevent groupthink, he just says a bunch of stuff like alternatives should be like these are like his word for word exact what you should do in order to prevent groupthink. So we just thought we would add that into our slide.
But yeah, it basically is just like what he came up with, and he stresses about it a lot, and in like articles and everything, like that's like what he interprets about it.
They talk a lot about at least one group member should be assigned the role of the devil's advocate, and that should be a different person each meeting. Therefore, there's one person that's able to kind of go against the group each meeting, just like even if they don't want to, but like just to point out some like certain things to maybe fix, or and it's good to change it each meeting because then everyone gets a chance, and it's a good way to get benefits of groupthink going.
And then the approach to knowing for groupthink theory is positivistic and empirical. I actually had a hard time like grasping this, so I went to her office and like talked to her about it. And what we came up with really was that it has to do with like the hard facts, and it has to like she basically made it simple for me and said because of this like this happens, which really like made it so much clearer to me why groupthink would be positivistic and empirical. Basically, it applies to groupthink because majority of people are going to go along with something because an individual doesn't want to feel like left out, or they don't want to like not be a part of the group. So because they don't want to be left out, they fall into groupthink and they fall into the pressures of the whole group instead of being unique and like individual.
So for communication traditions, socio-psychological, someone's behavior is influenced by a variable cause and effect model. And an example of this in groupthink is because psychologically people are more inclined to be fitting into the in-group opposed to being a part of the out-group. Just psychologically we want to be in that in-group, we don't want to be in the out-group, we don't want to go against the majority of the group's decision just to avoid conflict and keep harmony within our group.
And then it's also socio-cultural, which is individuals are parts of larger groups who have unique roles and patterns of interactions. This can be applied to groupthink because people come together and don't really want to be excluded. This could be either when it comes to their culture or their religion. And another example could be like joining a sorority. They want to be a part of something. They want to like be a part of something bigger than themselves.
This kind of has a lot to do with like cults and gangs too. They say groupthink has a lot to do with that. So we read about.
Yeah.
Communication context. So groupthink is generally small group communication among at least 3 individuals. So we just have a quick clip from Mean Girls, and you're gonna see that Katie is listening to the rules of the plastic, and it's making her make sure that she conforms to all of the plastic standards, so that she is then comes from the out group and is into the in group.
Watch 90 Day Fiancé. So good.
Happy endings.
What? Have you seen it?
You wanna watch The Affair?
No. Search for UFC fights.
Watch what you want on the Fire TV stick now with Alexa voice remote.
Having lunch with the plastics was like leaving the actual world and entering Girl World. And Girl World had a lot of rules.
You can't wear a tank top 2 days in a row, and you can only wear your hair in a ponytail once a week. So I guess you pick today. Oh, and we only wear jeans or track pants on Fridays. Now, if you break any of these rules, you can't sit with us at lunch. Well, I mean, not just you, like any of us. Okay, like if I was wearing jeans today, I would be sitting over there with the art freaks. Oh, and we always vote before we ask someone to eat lunch with us because you have to be considerate of the rest of the group. Well, I mean, you wouldn't buy a skirt without asking your friends first if it looks good on you. I wouldn't. Right.
So basically, She was being a new girl at school, so she really wanted to be in with the cool crowd, and they even gave an example, like, if you don't follow these rules, you're gonna be hanging out with those art freaks over there, and like, she's new, she definitely didn't wanna be with the art freaks, like, so that was just a really good example of her falling into conformity of the group.
And organizational is the communication within and among large extended environments. This is a form of, this can fit into the groupthink theory because it can be related into the business workplace. That's what I got a lot out of it for groupthink. And an example I thought of was, you know, everyone's seen Wolf of Wall Street, right? There's like a really famous scene from when the boss, Leonardo, gets in front of everyone, and he's like trying to get everyone on the phones, like he's trying to persuade everyone. He's like really like strong. I was gonna put a clip in, but it said the F word like every other time. Yeah, but like everyone goes with him and everyone goes along with him because they don't want to go against the boss, and he's like really strong about everything. So that goes back to like the group leader that's like really like passionate about things. So yeah, that's how organizational would work for groupthink theory.
Criteria, we put axology because it's what is worth knowing, and there is a lot of value in knowing groupthink so that you can know if you're being affected by it or if those around you are being affected by it. I guess that's what I just said. So like, this is worth knowing because you don't necessarily want to be affected by it unless you're getting benefits out of groupthink. So that's why it falls into the axology criteria. Testability. Scholars have pointed out that there is validity problems within the theory, therefore questioning its testability. For example, two scholars looked into the groupthink theory, Longley and Pruitt, and they criticized the theory, arguing that Janus was incorrect not adding self-esteem into his theory. But you'll see in later writings of Janus, he actually did add the self-esteem into the theory because it is a big part of the theory. And then heuristic, basically refers to the amount of research and new thinking stimulated by the theory. This is groupthink definitely has heurism because it's constantly being researched. Like we constantly want to know why people are so timid. We constantly want to know why people keep to themselves and don't want to like go against the group. And we always want to know if groupthink changes it like changes in different contexts or different situations. Groupthink is like everywhere, whether you like realize it or not. And like we said before, it went from being a coined term to being a highly theorized term. So it just went from being coined by William to all this research by Irving. And it's just because people constantly want to understand why people act the way they do. Like why are we doing this? And it's really interesting.
And it's a theory from like the 1950s, and it's still around today, and it's still always coming up with new research too. So that's a huge part of that.
So it has withstood that. It has withstood the test of time. Janus's thinking on groupthink has been quite influential in several fields of study. It's also like because we had such a hard time finding anything on groupthink, it's because it is such an old theory, and it's now moved into not just the communication field, but also cognitive and social psychology, anthropology, and political science. So like when we were researching, we could actually like look up articles in the psychology field, and there's a lot of groupthink like within that field, not just communication. So groupthink has a lot to do with other fields rather than just communications, because so many people want to know why we act the way that we do.
And scholars continue to investigate many of its fundamental features, and the theory like constantly continues to be discussed when it has to do with popular media. So then next is like my article. And I chose an article, it was called Are We at Risk of Groupthink in Our Approach to Teamwork Interventions in Healthcare? My article was really interesting actually. It didn't have a specific hypothesis. It was more of just like, it was looking into whether teamwork and groupthink affects healthcare negatively. There was a bunch of different authors. They used qualitative research. The article basically dealt with the incidence of medical error, adverse clinical events, and poor quality healthcare being unacceptably high. One thing that was like really that stuck out to me in the article that was that they used a meta-analysis of the literature on teamwork, and they came up with 3 limitations that I thought was really interesting. The first one was that the studies had diverse content and some outcomes were not relevant. The second limitation was that the predominant study design was a pre-post design with no control group, so it was actually really hard for them to elaborate and separate the effects of teamwork training from those of training, like those people with training versus no training. And then the third was, out of the 2,650 teams that were tested, including in that analysis, only 80 were healthcare teams. And then there was, they were paired with 1,660 teams, but of that, like the whole group, there was military, aviation, and different kinds of groups, so it wasn't just healthcare, which limited the findings on healthcare, so that was like a big problem in their analysis. And then just basically, the result that they came up with was that there were reasons why some of the components of effective teamwork, such as shared mental models, team orientation, and mutual trust could impair the delivery of health. And an example they gave was that studies show that brainstorming results in fewer ideas rather than more, and hinders rather than helps productivity. So it was really interesting.
So my research article was a qualitative research study as well, and it argued that past research using qualitative research approaches may produce an unrealistic correlation among groupthink symptoms. That's why they wanted to do another qualitative research method, and so they came up with a large group of people and they split it in half, and there was people that knew, they asked them a variety of questions. It was deciphering whether 2 shapes were the same or not. It was like completely computer based, so there was no effects of groupthink. That is until half of the group received information on what the answers might have been. So then that half of the group was more willing to not listen to the other half because they actually had inside information on what the answers could be. So they were less affected by groupthink. Overall, group members with full information favored the best decision alternative more than did group members with hidden profiles prior to discussion. So if they were more likely to conform into groupthink until they had that outside information given to them. And I said that my article was a positivistic approach because the research were in full control of the alterations and what was happening. And yeah, that's basically it. And there's the list of all the researchers that were involved.
So that, just to wrap it up, groupthink can impact decision making in positive and negative ways. Through research and everything, we really saw that groupthink kind of leans more on the negative side, and there's definitely a lot of examples that show that it was more negative. And groupthink happens in your everyday life, and especially in the classroom setting, in the work setting. You're constantly a part of a group and you're constantly listening to other people, giving your input. So groupthink just really is everywhere, whether you see it or not.
And groups who cooperate can use it to solve problems, but also use it in ways that hurt the group and the individuals as well. So I threw this picture at the end because I really felt like that really wraps up what exactly we were talking about. When we all think alike, no one is really thinking, because no one is putting their individual uniqueness on certain topics that they might feel strongly about, but don't have the self-esteem to speak up for themselves, which is them being affected by groupthink. And those are just some helpful links we put at the end. If you guys check out our slideshow online, those are helpful videos that we just didn't add into our slideshow.
Yeah, they were too long. But yeah, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
So, this is how you said it's good and bad groupthink. Do you know if there's a way, like juries, the jury gets to be unanimous when they come back with a verdict?
Yeah.
Is there anything do you know if there's any way how they combat groupthink? So, in a jury setting.
That is interesting because I feel like groupthink probably does happen a lot in the jury setting. I've never been in the jury setting, so
I've never had to. I don't know what it's like.
I don't really either.
I thought that it was like more individual.
Yeah, like isn't everyone
It's not?
on the jury can talk to each other?
That's a good,
That is good. That'd be
Yeah,
interesting to
because
look into.
that's
It's
what
like a
you
black
do.
and white movie, and
Yeah.
like they all sit down, and
Yeah.
one guy voices it, and it's not the same as everyone else's. It's like
Yeah.
over.
So usually in this class, I would have you write an analysis on what that means and this idea of groupthink. And so they were trying to combat that, like, oh, I have this going on. So they kind of you'll see that whole process through the jury. So if you want to take a look at it, you can. They don't have a formal process of how this happens, but when they try to vet people, right? So when the prosecutor tries to vet people out, they ask particular questions to say, why or why not with this person? You know, would they be more susceptible to groupthink, or is there a bias? So allegedly, you try to find people who won't be susceptible to that, but regardless of what happens, in some type of way, we're part of the society. We're part of a particular way of thinking, so we're going to think in a particular way based on that.
Okay.
So.
I was just like a leader, one person actually has to say like the opposite, whereas the leader has to be a leader.
No, and not, you don't wanna have a leader. Oftentimes, if you have a leader, cause there's not a set leader, these are all 6 to 12 jurors, depending on what the jurisdiction is, to make those decisions. And that's why they have this, group of people to do it that way. And that's how they come up with those particular numbers, but it's not, here are the groupthink procedures.
Okay.
So I can have a weird question. I recently had a conversation with a family member about self-confidence growing up, like in your early education, and how that can shape how people perform like later on. And I feel like a lot of groupthink is related to, like, a lot of examples I could think of are like peer pressure, like growing up and having to like deal with like the leader of the group and stuff like that. So do you think that like groupthink as a negative thing? Do you think that having like self-confidence and like those kind of classes in early education can stop the negativity of groupthink?
That's what I talked about with the two theorists coming at Edwin Janis for not having self-esteem in his original theory, because it does have so much to do with it. So like if you're in a group and you have a higher level of confidence, I feel like confidence, self-esteem kind of like go hand in hand. If you have a higher level, you're more apt to stand up for yourself. You're more apt to become a group leader too, but if you have like a lower self-esteem, you probably will just, a lot of things will go unsaid and you just will go along with the group because you're too nervous to talk.
Yeah, they like after researching it, it like has to do so much. It depends like heavily on peer pressure and your own self-esteem. Like that's what a lot of the research just came up with, and it's just always dealing with who's the most confident, who's like the most sure of themselves and the sure of their answers. So I think that if they were to teach a course on it, that if they like talked about peer pressure and like confidence, then groupthink could definitely be avoided in those like certain ways.
And you can see how there's a relationship between those two when you think about the social, psychological, right?
Yeah.
So what's going on in your head impacts what you're gonna do socially. So you can see that kind of correlation even by asking that question. I have a question. Can you make a connection for us in relation to how, you said that groupthink was very heuristic, but I need you to make a connection between, you said it was heuristic, but you couldn't find a lot of journal articles. So can you kind of make that connection between communication and how you think it is heuristic?
Yeah, I think it's heuristic just because there's like been a lot of studies, but because of the journal articles, like there was like such a setback because a lot of them weren't like up to date pretty much. But there was like definitely a lot of articles that I just like couldn't connect to groupthink in a specific way. I couldn't find ones that had like direct like methods and stuff.
Like stuff like that.
Yeah, but I don't know, like, cause it's
I
constant.
thought it was like heroism because like it went from being just a coin term and then it kind of got thrown away, and then someone else completely different years later was like, we need to know about this, like we need to know why people think the way that they do, and that's why they picked it back up again and they created this whole theory. I don't know if it's kind of got lost since then, but
I don't think it's lost. Just to put you guys in what I'm trying to say is primarily this is used in business communication or organizational communication.
Yeah.
Okay. And because it's used in that way to say how do we avoid it. So in any basic business communication class, you're gonna run into that.
Another place that you're gonna run into it, like you said, you're gonna run into it in psychology. So it is in fact, because if you know, communication comes from psychology.